I'm Patrick.
This
You're
is Jeff.
experiencing Happening Sounds. In this part, which is either a follow-up or a prequel to me talking about 5 albums that shaped the way I
Jeff's
listen to
turn.
music, what we're doing here is we're taking 5 albums from our collection that have influenced our musical tastes, how we listen to music, what we think of music, but by no means are they our favorite albums. These are just 5 albums that shine a light on our tastes.
The first one is this. This is the album 1999 by Prince.
What year did this album come out?
1982.
So it's like a Orwell type thing.
Like an Orwell. Prince was very forward-looking,
Yeah.
realizing that the year 1999 would eventually come.
Yes, yes.
So, for me, Prince is important just because he was the first musician that affected me and made me say to myself, wow, music is cool and I want to get into this. And I start asking my mom to get me a Prince album. And the first one I got was Purple Rain. But for me, this one was the one that made the most impact on me, just because of the double album.
Yeah.
And also, I just loved Prince's energy, and I loved the fact that it felt like, look at that picture, it felt like there's no hold bars. It was dangerous, exactly. I would go to the shopping mall and I would buy some Prince and I would smuggle it back into the family home underneath my jacket so Mom wouldn't see that I'd bought another record from that horrible Prince and his corruptive influence. Prince. So what had happened was, after getting into Prince and becoming a super huge Prince fan, I went through a phase where I was also really big into electro funk and funk in general, and that led me one day to hear the song Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel off this album. And I bought this album actually expecting it to be a funk album, which it was not. I mean, Sledgehammer is a great funk song, but basically this is an art rock album. And I became a big fan of it, and it started me exploring a lot of his earlier work, and especially his 70s work with Genesis. So after listening to this and becoming a fan, I became a big fan of progressive rock and art rock, which down the road led me off into artistic sounding music and music that was a little bit beyond 3 chords. So Peter Gabriel was very important for me in that way.
I remember when I first saw the Sledgehammer video and just how weird it was. There was a video collection that Peter Gabriel put out a while ago that I think it was pencil crayons on the cover. It was like,
Okay.
It was just all his weirdo, just imaginative rock and roll. I'm looking at this album and I noticed that it came out in 1986. It was a very good year for Patrick Michaelishans being born.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you are.
Year of my birth.
Wow.
And produced by Daniel Lanois. I was just in Winnipeg a while ago.
There you are.
With Winnipeg Zone Venetian Snares. So many
So
Winnipeg
many
connections to this album.
There you are. So, if you picked up the cassette version of So, or the CD version, it featured a track that was a duet with this artist, Laurie Anderson. And I went...
Wait. Sorry. If you picked up a cassette version...
of So,
Oh, because it wasn't on CD. Wait.
or on the CD, but not on the vinyl.
Oh.
There was a bonus track on the So cassette and the So CD.
What song was that?
This Is the Picture, Excellent Birds, which was a duet with this artist, Laurie Anderson. And becoming this huge Peter Gabriel fan, I started exploring people that were inspiring for him, and Laurie Anderson was one. This is a beat-up copy I bought at a library clearance sale, and this album changed a lot of my thinking about music because it really stretched the idea of what music could be. On this record, Laurie doesn't so much sing so much as she tells stories over music, and and I like the spare minimalist style that's obviously really influenced by people like Steve Reich and Philip Glass, and I really like the aesthetic that's going on with this record. It's a very soothing record. Very, I guess you could say it's in a way kind of 80s psychedelia.
I really like the cover.
Mm-hmm.
I've always liked the cover.
Mm.
But the white sunglasses, I don't know if it's just the light glare or if they're painted over, but it's a very striking look.
Mm-hmm.
It looks pretty badass too.
Are you familiar with this record?
Yeah.
Yeah, love it a lot.
Yeah, this is the only one I'm familiar with. And obviously Oh Superman is the big single off of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you could
Yes.
consider it a single.
Well, it was a single. It was
Yeah.
a chart topper in Europe.
Was it?
Yeah,
Oh, those Europeans, they sure know their music.
that's right.
This is pretty cool. And then on the back, it looks like she's playing a violin with a lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She used to do a lot of interesting things. Like she used to string her bow with reel-to-reel tape, and then have a playback.
A playback head or
A
something?
playback head on her violin.
That's
So she'd
cool.
be playing samples with her violin
That's wild.
bow.
Well,
Yeah.
birds of a feather here.
So it's sheer coincidence that Laurie Anderson would later go on to marry this man, who's also a huge musical influence of mine. And my whole discovery of Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground and all that stuff came one night when I was listening to CBC Radio, and they were playing this record as an album spotlight. So they were playing the whole album back to back. And I came in the middle and I didn't know what it was. And it was shocking the first time I heard it, because it was essentially these folk and blues songs, but with this guy who was, once again, not really singing the songs, but more talking them like it was a conversation. And it was a very, he had a very matter-of-fact delivery, but it was also kind of poetic, and it was speaking to a lot of the political issues of the time, and it was a very rough and rugged portrait of New York City, and it really captured my imagination, and from there I wanted to explore everything that he had produced. And that said, I mean, a lot of Lou Reed's solo albums, they're not great, you know. People talk about the genius of Lou Reed, and he's not always such a genius, you know, but you kind of love him for that too. He's very down to earth, right? And even his failures are fascinating.
Do you consider this one a failure? Or do
No, I consider this a masterpiece.
Oh, I'm reading
New
the back here. It says, the album is recorded and mixed, blah, 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 blah. In essentially the order you have here, it's meant to be listened to in one 58-minute sitting as though it was a book or a movie. Is there a narrative in New York?
There is not a narrative, but it is thematically about New York City, and it's about politicians, and it's about things like that. Now, you're also a big fan of Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground. What attracted you to the Velvet Underground and Lou Reed initially? How did you make that connection?
I heard... I've read about the Velvet Underground. Everyone talks about the Velvet Underground. It's one of those, the cliche, sold 100 records, but every one of those 100 people who bought started a band. I think the first person who played the Velvet Underground for me, that I was conscious that it was the Velvet Underground, was my friend Crystal, who I volunteered with at the West End. She was kind of a musical weirdo who got me into a lot of the bands that I ended up loving and following, like Guided by Voices and the Velvet Underground and The Fall. And so yeah, Velvet Underground was a big thing, and she would talk about them all the time. And I went to Music Trader one day, and they had the Peel Slowly in C box. I got like $30. I've read the booklet probably 20 times over the last 15 years, and I've absorbed the music. And then the 45th anniversary editions that have been coming out over the last several years, I bought all 4 of those. The only album I haven't given. I love the first 2 albums because of their simplicity and how raw they are. It's one of the first albums that I almost learned how to play fully on guitar, Velvet Underground and Nico, because it's 1-chord songs or 2-chord songs, or a little bit more difficult 3-chord songs, but they're all the basic either ham fist power chords or your basic whole major so chords. Then I went from Velvet Underground and I found a copy of Transformer, which is the album he's best known for. It's got Walk on the Wild Side and Satellite of Love, which was a Velvet Underground song. Candy Says is on there, which is another Velvet Underground song.
Okay, Candy Says is not on Transformer.
Isn't it?
No,
Who says?
Andy's Chest is on there.
Andy's Chest is on there. And Vicious is on there
Vicious.
too, which is super popular. And then I went the complete opposite direction. I found a really cool remastered lenticular covered copy of Metal Machine Music on CD, and I've listened to that a bunch of times. It's white noise, man. It's white noise, and it helps you sleep. But that's how I got into Lou Reed. I got into it through my friend Crystal, her talking about it and how dirty and seedy it was. But I guess when I got to it, it just sounded like rock and
I
roll.
discovered Lou Reed first, and for me, the Velvet Underground was just this band that Lou was in.
Really?
Yeah.
That's yeah. I haven't heard this album yet. I've heard like Berlin. I've heard Sally Can't Dance, Transformer, Metal Machine Music, but never New York.
Recommended.
It's on the list. Of rock. And da 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 da. We have one album left, and I think I know where we're going just from knowing you.
So this is The Art of Walking by Pere Ubu. And if you talk to critics about Pere Ubu, they often talk about the albums Dub Housing or Modern Dance, which are great records, but this is the one that screwed with my mind. I first became fascinated with Pere Ubu after I saw them on a rock video show back in the day on Much Music. And it was a video for a song that would come off their 1988 album, The Tenement Year. It was a track called We Have the Technology. And in this video, the frontman for this band was this morbidly obese man, like tottering back and forth in a business suit. And I just thought, wow, this is the ultimate anti-rock star, right? There's no pretty boy stuff going on here. This is a real person in a real emotional band. And so I became fascinated with Pere Ubu. But this album, when I heard this, I picked this up. I found it in a used record store somewhere. The copy that I had then, this is a newer copy, but it was just so, it's just such a bizarre album. This is their most avant-garde album. And at the time when I was in high school and I first heard this record, I had never heard anything quite so avant-garde. At that time I had never heard of Captain Beefheart, or my notion of experimental music was very limited. This is a weird record. And my thinking at the time, it blew my mind because I was like, are people allowed to make records like this?
Which Pere Ubu album is this? What number album is this?
This would be the fourth full length.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
this is because I think their first 5 are considered the ones to get the core albums. Then everything else after that is, if you're a super fan, you follow to a certain point. But if you're this is one of the ones that came out in that big box set, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, as a hardcore Pere Ubu fan, I think that anything from the 70s and 80s is worth picking up. As soon as you get to the end of the 80s, not so much. Although there's the odd album here or there that are pretty awesome.
Now it says on the back, this album, it's Pere Ubu version 4.0.
Yeah.
So it's their fourth lineup. Is this their first album with Mayo Thompson from?
Yes, I was just going to say this album features Mayo Thompson from the Red Crayola on guitar and vocals on some tracks too.
What did the original artwork look like? Because this is pretty.
It's pretty close to this actually.
Oh, because it's pretty retina searing.
Yeah.
This is a painful album to look at.
And painful to listen to too.
Oh, okay. So it's just an assault on all the
It's
senses.
assault on the senses. Pere Ubu, The Art of Walking. So that's our series on the top albums that have changed my musical perspectives in life, and also take a look at the other video in our series about the top 5 albums that have changed Patrick's view of music in his life. Thank you for listening to Happening Sounds. Please click the subscribe button down below.